Welcome to Winning the Battle. I'm Coach LJ with CrossFit 1776, and today I have a special guest with me. This is Jessica Phillips with Earth to Us Yoga. She's going to be joining us today with our first topic on fear. Last week when we posted our first video with Winning the Battle, I asked for you guys to give me suggestions, and I got a ton of them. The one that was suggested the most was the topic of fear. And after Jessica and I talked, we thought what better time to go ahead and talk about fear than right now with everything that's going on in the world today. I would like to give a shout out because we are drinking our shakes from Echo today. They are doing curbside pickup, and so they are making the best of the times right now going on. And if you want to get one from them or a tea, then feel free just to message them, and they accept Venmo, which makes it super easy. And you just go and pick up your shake or your tea, and you're good to go. Lots of other businesses are doing that as well, not just in our community here in Troy, Alabama, but around the world. So check out what your community is doing and support your local businesses. Okay, so now back into our talk today of fear. I put a quote on our board today: "Don't let fear strike you out, keep you from playing the game." I saw that on a mother's Facebook page as her child was getting ready to play baseball, and thought, first, what an awesome mom to instill that in her child. And so I wanted to write it on the board. As Jessica and I were talking before the show, Jessica informed me that this comes from a movie. Is that right?
From a Disney movie in the 90s.
And I did not know that, so that was so interesting. And you told me that it was your senior year?
Yeah, it was my senior year yearbook quote. The little quote under the cap and gown pictures. That was my quote.
All right, so let's actually, before we go through these, just talk about that. So tell us about why that was your quote at that time.
I mean, it was just like a really cool mentality of don't let the fear of the unknown keep you from the possibility of that outcome. When you go into something, you never know what the outcome is going to be. I mean, you've got a 50-50 chance, of winning or losing. And if you choose fear and you don't even go into it, then it's always a loss. So
I like that, and I think it's a great motto for everybody to have in life. And that's another thing that Jessica and I were talking about, is even though she is from the yoga kind of background world with her business, and I'm from CrossFit kind of background world, this is not just related on fitness. What we're wanting to talk about today can relate to just life in general. But yes, lots of things that we do in the fitness world, you can then translate into life itself. So as we're talking today, we probably will relate a lot of things to personal experiences that we've had and things out in the fitness world. We're going to kind of go through our bullets on the board. The first one that was brought up to us was that people fear the unknown or surprises. And we thought that was a great topic to start with fear, because right now what we're kind of living in is kind of the unknown. It seems as if the world was taken by a surprise from what is going on. And I know in the CrossFit world, when CrossFit first started, that one thing that was the big topic was always just you're preparing for the unknown. When competitions first started in CrossFit, you didn't know what the workouts were going to be as an athlete. You were expected to go in just knowing that you were prepared. You had prepared your body, you had prepared your mind for the unknown. So that is scary to some people, and something that we all think that we have to overcome. And we'll talk more when we get to the bottom of how do we overcome fear, and we don't. Because what we want to explain today is that you're not overcoming it, you're actually learning to live with it. That fear is not necessarily a bad thing, it's human nature, and something we learn to cope with and live with, and actually how to become better because of things that we might become fearful of. Jessica, tell us something, the unknown or surprises, and maybe an experience that you have or how you feel about that.
Well, just talking about life in general, my whole fitness journey began with fear and the fear of the unknown. I raced motocross competitively for years and actually, held a state title. And when I started having injuries and started having multiple surgeries, the unknown was if I was ever going to have mobility again. So my whole fitness journey actually began with fear that I was going to lose my mobility, because my first complete knee reconstruction was, I was 18 years old, and it was my senior year of high school, and just completely destroyed my knee, and they actually had to graft parts of my hamstring to try to repair my knee. And that was at 18. I was told, I was going to lose a lot of my mobility. And then by the time my third and my fourth knee surgery came along, and then a back surgery and a shoulder surgery, just the fear of losing mobility, I knew there had to be a way that I could regain it back, and that's how I found yoga and kind of started my whole fitness journey, was just because of the fear of the unknown of, what my future was going to hold.
So we're going to skip down then, because I think that plays well into, some people say they're scared of illness or injury. I was on into my CrossFit journey when I too tore my ACL and two different parts of my meniscus, and then another meniscus and another knee. So it was scary coming back into that, or not stopping. Actually, I didn't stop doing CrossFit, whereas most people would let something like that stop them, because it would be scary. So I think, having an illness, I know a lot of people are scared to even enter a gym sometimes, even to start something, even like yoga or anything. They're scared to start it because they're scared of the illness they may have or a past injury. To me, I think the best thing to do is always communicate. If you do have somebody you're training under, like Jessica or myself, to help you through with that. Did you have a coach, Jessica, to help you through that, or did you just kind of start that whole process on your own?
I had some awesome physical therapists that really spoke some good words to me about, mobility is movement. Mobility requires movement. If you want to regain mobility, then you have to move. And that really kind of changed my perspective, because I had more of the mentality of, oh, you need rest and heal. And then that brought stiffness and arthritis. And it's kind of this balance of rest is very needed, but mobility is very needed too. And just a little bit of my history. 2007, I tore my ACL, my MCL, and the meniscus out of my right knee. Then 2010, I retore the ACL. I retore the backside of the meniscus. They did a patella tendon graft at that point in time, so they actually damaged my kneecap during that surgery. I got up from surgery in recovery to start physical therapy and tore my ACL within 45 minutes of coming out of surgery. So they took me back into surgery, replaced my ACL again. What they thought was a good idea at the time was they tapped out the holes to make the holes bigger, because they thought it would last longer with the ACL, but it actually compromised my femur bone, because when I tore my fourth ACL, I tore my ACL, the remaining meniscus, and I broke my femur. So where the ball of your femur actually meets into your knee, they had drilled in it so many times that it just compromised the bone, so it broke the femur. And then the fifth knee surgery was once again a torn ACL. So the fifth torn ACL, they scraped the bone of the remaining meniscus, so it's just bone on bone now. And they actually just pulled me out of surgery and tried to get my husband to sign off on a knee replacement. And his words were, when she wakes up, she will kill me if I sign off for her to have a knee replacement. But yeah, so that fifth surgery was November will be 2 years. And then in the midst of that, I had a spinal operation because I had some collapsed vertebrae in my back, and then I actually had a compound fractured collarbone that they replaced with a titanium rod and some screws in my chest. But so for me, it's every surgery I would make a comeback. I felt like I needed to make a comeback, and I needed to be stronger and fitter and better, and I couldn't understand if I was doing everything right, why was I still getting injured? And I just kind of had to come to a point where I had to stop fearing the injury itself and just become as prepared as I could be. And then, like, with this spinal knee surgery was one of my absolute best recoveries, because I was supposed to have had a replacement that following February, and they were like, hey, we don't know what you're doing, but
Keep doing it.
you're doing it. And the same thing with my back surgery. It was one of what they considered to be a 3-part surgery, and I went back 6 weeks after the first initial surgery. They did an MRI to see what had kind of went on, if the spacers they had put in had taken, if it had started taking to the bone, and my spine had actually started to show signs of healing.
Wow.
And it was not supposed to have done that at that point. So, you know, they were like, hey, just do what you're going to do. So, and a lot of that was, you know, the power of prayer and the power of preparation and just learning to take care of myself. So,
And your story is fabulous. I've heard about it from you, but also read about it in Troy Life magazine. Was that last month?
yes.
Yes. So to pick up a copy of that and read more about it if you're interested. And Jessica, you shared with me a book that I still need to pick up, but I want you to share that with everybody else, because I think that story of that particular person is amazing too. And if you're into reading things like this, it can really motivate you to get over a fear that you may be harboring inside. What was the name of that book?
Going the Distance, I think is what it's called. I need to double check that. But yeah, a girl very similar to story of mine. I struggled with weight a lot of my life, and at one point in time was about 220 pounds. And this woman was exactly 220 pounds when she found her fitness journey, and got very healthy, very fit, was on top of the world, and was actually at the Panama City Beach Ironman, preparing to crew a team because she planned on racing it next year. You know, peak physical condition, and was hit by a car riding down the side of the road with a group of cyclists. She was in the rear and was actually hit by a car, and it was a hit and run. The car tried to run, but they ended up stopping him. But yeah, it was just that. I mean, you just never know.
You don't.
I mean,
there's a book I want to bring to you too. It's called The Unthinkable, which is about a man who doesn't have either one of his legs, and he has prosthetic legs, and how he's still able to run marathons. So it's definitely inspiring to read things like that. I feel like that can even help motivate, like I said, people overcome that fear. And that's kind of going to take us into our next kind of bullet, is something new or change. A lot of people get stuck in the rut, so to speak, and they fear just changing something up, or if it is something new. Not fitness related, but even just moving. I know, Jessica, you're not from Troy originally, and neither am I. So moving, to me, I had never moved. So that was actually something that was kind of scary at the time. I was having to leave everything that I knew and come to a new town and completely start over. On one side of that, I was like, hey, nobody knows me. They don't know what I'm capable of. I want to chill for a little bit. I can. But on the other side of that, I was like, oh man, now I've got to kind of prove myself all over again in my career, in different aspects of my life. So I know that when you're seeking something new, that can also be scary. Is there anything, how long have you been here in Troy now?
February was a year, so about a year and a month.
Okay.
And I'm kind of a little weird with that, because I actually thrive off of change and newness. And just a few weeks ago, I was asking my husband if he cared if I shaved my head, because I was just like, let's just start over with hair. Like, 'cause I thrive off of just that fresh, like, do something different. So, like, we lived in a tiny house for 3.5 years on 70 acres of land, and went from that to just, you know, I know people would think Troy is like super small town, but for us this is huge. So I mean, we thrive off of that change and that newness, and you never know what tomorrow is gonna hold. And that's kind of the lifestyle that we've always lived. When we lived in our tiny house, we traveled a lot, and it drove some people crazy, because I had something new every time. a new dream or a new vision or a new goal, because I just thrive off of that.
Yeah, my oldest sister packed up from Atlanta one year and just decided to take what she could fit in her car and move to Portland, Oregon, and she lived there for years. And people always said, how in the world can you do that? Like,
Yeah.
I don't understand. So I think that's just different mentality of people and the awesomeness of everybody being so different. I think that's a great thing, but something we can definitely learn from others as well. But that is definitely one thing. I know along with something new and change, we're going to kind of skip a bullet and go down to judgment. Is sometimes the reason people, I think, fear something new or change is because they feel like when they do go somewhere else, maybe they're being judged by others, or that they're just maybe won't be liked by others. And that one's on here too, so we can go ahead and hit on that one. But I think with somebody like you that doesn't fear those things, then that means you're not really worried. You're comfortable within yourself. You're not worried about that.
And the reason why I've let a lot of that go is because in my, 20s, I was so consumed with what people thought about me that it at one point in time controlled my life.
Right.
Like completely controlled my life. Like to the point of, before I would post something on social media, I would think, okay, what would this person think about it? What would that person think about it? And it would just utterly consume me, the fear of judgment from others. And I read a book, going back to the books, there's a book called The 4 Agreements, and it's how to live a life of freedom and peace. And 2 of the agreements that kind of come together, these are like, this is the agreement and this is what you walk through life with, this mentality. And one of them is make no assumptions. Mm-hmm. So never assume that somebody is thinking something about you. So when you make that post on Facebook and you speak your heart, how do I really know what you think about it?
Right.
I assume.
Right.
And until you come up and say, Jess, that was dumb, I mean, then I'm probably assuming wrong, because 90% of the time what we assume is not correct.
Right. And I think that goes back to perspective, and that's a topic that I think we'll hit on later, because a lot of people said that would be a good topic to talk about. But people have different perspectives, and that's a good thing, because we need different opinions, we need different perspectives in the world. And going back to social media, especially in young people, so I'm glad you brought that up when you were younger, that is a major concern, that they thrive off of likes. And it's not just young people, it's older people too, to the point where they'll falsify their information. It might be that an incident happened in their life, but then they're going to dramatize it basically to make it be where they receive more likes, because they're thriving off of that.
Or they'll be extremely vague about something, wanting people to reach out to them and give them that attention in that way. But in playing right along with that, one of the other agreements in that book is to never take things personally. Because a lot of the times we think when somebody speaks something to us that it's just hurting us, but we don't see the hurt in them, because if somebody is saying that to you, I promise what they are saying to themselves is so much worse.
Right.
Because if people can be cold-hearted or mean-hearted enough to actually judge you or to verbally, abuse you in that way, what they're saying to themselves in here is so much more toxic and worse. So.
And I listen to a lot of podcasts, mainly because I don't have time like I wish I had to read right now. So when I'm running or something, I'll listen to some podcasts. I love Gary B with Gary B Productions. I don't know if you've ever heard of him or listened to him. He does cuss a lot, so if you get offended by that, don't listen to him, or just look over it, because you can just look over it if you have an open mind and go with him. But he talks a lot about social media, because that's just a really good way, because it's free to reach out to each other in the world that we're in. And he said when he first started that he didn't worry about how many likes he got. He might have gotten 1 or 2 likes, but he was 100% real every time and just put himself out there, because he was just not worried about that. Now he's one of the most successful people there are when it comes to business management world and things like that. And Of course, now he has tons of light, so everything he does.
Yeah.
But when he started out, he didn't, and he kept being true to himself. And I think that's what's important, is to be true to yourself.
And I don't think we quite comprehend when you fear judgment, you actually give somebody control over your life. You are handing them the keys to your life, because if what you're doing is based around fear of judgment, then somebody actually has complete control over what you say, what you do, how you act.
Right.
And I don't want anybody to have that much control over me. I mean, that's kind of, maybe it's just being silly in that way, but I don't want to give anybody that much control over me.
Right.
So it's kind of being the master of your own helm, I guess. When you release that fear of judgment, you're in control.
Right. And I think, one thing when I did my first yoga class with you, at the end of Jessica's yoga class, we do about 10-15 minutes of meditation. And first, I loved her yoga because it's a flow. What kind of flow do you call it?
We do more, it's vinyasa style flow.
There you go. And so I love that. And she's just really good at differentiating for people and what their body can do. And at the end, when we do our meditation, my first time I came to her, I'm not a crier. I don't like to cry in front of people. And we got done with class. I said, "Oh my gosh, you brought me to tears." That was very intense. And it was because of the words that she was saying through our meditation, just really had me reflecting on things. It had me slow down because I'm so busy and thinking about some things. And one word that she uses a lot is the word be intentional. Be intentional with your thoughts. And that's something I think about every day, because Jessica has instilled that with me through yoga and our meditating at the end. And I think that's important when we think about things that we're going to say to others, or even do. Our actions sometimes speak louder than words, that we need to think to be intentional. So tell us more about that.
And intentional means to do with purpose, on purpose. So, and it's not just intentional, but it's purposeful, like having purpose behind something. So like if I say something harmful or judgmental to somebody, what purpose does that give? I mean, what purpose does it serve? It serves nothing.
Right.
So that's why, like, a lot of the times during our meditation, I talk about speaking life into those around you, but also speaking life into yourself, because when you speak life with purpose, you give life. I mean, you actually speak life to yourself, and which just, I mean, you can sit there and speak words of encouragement to someone, words of life into someone, and just watch them just brighten up.
Right. And speaking of purpose, I know a lot of even what's going on right now is affecting people with their mental health. I've had a lot of moms say things to me about, we've had to sit down with my child and talk to them about their mental health, mainly because these seniors, most of them are seniors, are such extroverts that they're not doing well with this. And I've had some people that deal with mental health issues ask me, like, I survived this, and now this is going on, so what is my purpose right now? What is my purpose in life? And the thing is that, I don't know that we always know our purpose, or that our, I think our purpose is ever changing too. What do you feel about that?
I believe very much with the seasons of life. There's something different for every season of life. And just like during my season of injuries, at that time I couldn't see anything outside of my bubble. And now I'm to the point in my life where I'm actually so grateful for those injuries, for that season, because it has brought me to where I am now, and it completely transformed everything about who I am. And I think that we need to understand that everything is seasonal and everything has a purpose in that time, and we don't need to get too far ahead, or we don't need to go too far back. And we just need to kind of embrace that season where it's at. In some seasons we thrive, and I believe in some seasons we survive. And sometimes there's a season where you just need to survive. You need to look for the good in every day, look for the blessings in every day. I have a 4-year-old, so I can't speak from a perspective of having a senior that's missing out on their senior year. But you know what? You got a senior that you're able to love on just a little bit more while they're home with mama, before they go out in the world. So that can be selfish, but that can be something that you're counting a blessing with. And you're able to, with your school age children, for a short period of time, you're able to control their environment and sow into them and speak words of life into them. And just like I said, I think everything is seasonal, and we need to look at it that way, that this is not forever. We're not going to be in lockdown or quarantine forever. It's just a season.
And that's a big phrase that we hear a lot of, is this too shall pass, and it will. So let's move on to, I want to talk about failure and success. When I wrote this, I first put failure, and then I had an athlete come in and say, when you put failure up there, I think of success. And that clicked with me. It's like, I see as a teacher and as a coach that people fear failure a lot. They don't want to go to what I say. You don't know what your truest potential is until you do fail. So keep trying, keep going until you fail. Then you're going to know what your truest potential is. Then we got something to work with of how to become better from there. But the fear that particular athlete shared with me is that they're scared, they're afraid of becoming successful. When I shared that with Jessica, she gave me her insight on the success aspect of that. And so tell us what we talked about earlier with that.
Well, one thing is too, just with failure, I think we need to completely transform our mindset towards failure. And I'll come back to that, but with the success, backpacking onto that, we have no clue of what we're capable of. And some people fear success because once you start to learn what you're capable of, you realize you're capable of more. And then you realize that you can push yourself far beyond your limits. And that's scary for some people. Like when I competed in my first triathlon, it was kind of like I didn't just compete in it, I actually did very well in it. It was kind of like, oh no. I was supposed to have just survived this and stayed at this level, but the fact that I did very well at it, it was like, I got to do more now.
Right.
And I think that fear of success sometimes, we're actually scared to see what we're really capable of. But with the failure, failure, I hate the saying failure is not an option, because we shouldn't look at failure as a bad thing. There's an Ironman duo that I love watching their videos on YouTube. It's a father and son duo. His son has cerebral palsy, and they have completed and competed in Ironman all over the States. And he swims with his son in a kayak, pulling him behind him.
Wow.
He bicycles with his son in a little makeshift cart beside him the whole bicycle time, and then he runs with him in a kind of like an adult stroller.
Yeah.
And his son, they asked him, what are your thoughts on failure? And he says, you win some, you learn some. He said, because you never lose, you never fail. He said, if your mindset is right, you never fail, you just learn.
Right.
And coming from somebody who has cerebral palsy, and at one point in time in his life, he was deemed, mentally retarded, that he was never going to amount to anything. And for him to have that kind of mindset, sometimes you win some and you learn some. You could easily see his situation as the ultimate failure. He can't use his body.
Right.
But he sees it as you just learn to adapt.
Yeah. And I like what you said about how you've got to train, you got to turn your thinking around. It's all in your mindset. And that's one big thing that we always like to say is mindset is everything. And training your thinking to think more of how can I go to my fullest potential, and if I fail, that's okay. How can I learn from this and then become better from this? I see in the teaching world that I have to really train the parents to think that way more than I do the children, because I teach elementary school, so they're still learning these things. Children actually fear more of what their parents think than of what they're actually doing. If they fail something, they're actually okay with that because they know they can learn and they can get better at that, unless their parent has instilled that fear in them that they don't need to fail something.
Well, I'm in college right now, and I'll tell you, when I take a test, the answers that I remember the most are the ones I failed that were wrong, because that sticks in my mind, So even having that mentality of just learning and embracing those failures, and I think if we just truly embraced our failures, and looked and kind of picked apart that failure, we realized, I mean, get over it.
Yeah. And I had an intern 2 years ago, and she said she teaches math wonderfully now because it was her hardest struggle in school when she was younger. And she learned different tricks and things to do to overcome, her struggle. And so now she's a fabulous math teacher because of that. It wasn't what she was good at in school that she now is great at as an adult. It was her weakest thing that she overcame, and that's what she learned the most because it was her weakness.
Everything's just perspective, because you can talk about a divorce as a failed marriage, or you can talk about how you learned what you don't want in a spouse now. I mean, it's really just how you want to look at it from what perspective.
Speaking of, I hope none of those come out of the quarantine. No, I'm just kidding. Being stuck with your spouse all day. Well, let's move on to maybe things that are difficult, because I think sometimes people fear things that are difficult, or even competition, because of what we were just saying, that fear of failure. So they don't want to do what is difficult, again, because of they fear, ultimately it goes back to failure. Or even with my story of the student getting in trouble. They fear getting in trouble by somebody else if they don't do something the way that they think it needs to be done.
Well, and I think we learn from failure, we grow from difficulties. The learning and the knowledge is in the failure, and the growth is in the difficult times. And I went to a yoga conference a few weekends ago, and it was actually called Fearless Fest. And we talked, the whole topic was how we don't release fear. Sometimes we just do things afraid because we fear less. And one of the meditations that we did, at first it was so strange to me, but it was being thankful for your sufferings. And I just immediately was like, no, we shouldn't be thankful for our sufferings. We should leave those alone. And she was talking about how many people in history had these great, amazing outcomes right after their sufferings in life. Like right after, and even we could possibly use, later on, this specific scenario of what's going on in the world is a great suffering, but what beauty comes after, what rainbow comes after that storm.
Right.
And I think in those difficult times, in those suffering times, is when we have our most growth and development. And we fear difficulty, but we actually should embrace it because it's just growth. And seeing it that way, and that's just coming from a completely personal perspective with, if you read my article in Troy Life, I talk about how during my times of surgery, it wasn't the surgery, it was the recovery that was always difficult. 6 months here recovering, 6 months here recovering, 14 weeks being immobile at one point in time with my femur broken. But it was through those difficult times that I grew. And it's having one ACL construction kind of sucks, but when you go to have your fifth and and you've already had 5, or you've already had 4, and you know what's coming, you know the difficulties that are ahead. And I just had to see him as growth. It was just, or I would have gone down the abyss.
And I like that, and that kind of goes to, the very last thing here is how do we overcome fear? And you said we really, you kind of agree with that, is we don't overcome fear. We actually should embrace what is naturally there, and know if something's difficult, then it's going to be difficult, and we can learn from that. And also, back to perspective and everybody just being different, is we're all going to have different things that we're fearful of. And that is also where we can learn from each other. Everybody has a story. Everybody has a story that has made them learn something new. From experiences is how we grow. Some older people sometimes think that some of the things that we're speaking of now don't really relate to them. But I have seen that every decade brings something new. It's like you said, seasons or a new chapter in life. But you're constantly going through those seasons, and you're learning new things throughout different points in time in your life. And where somebody may seem very successful all the time because they have maybe a certain business and that looks successful, or they have different degrees and they have this job, and and they look successful, don't think for 1 minute that they didn't have a tough time getting there, that they didn't fall and stumble many times to get to where they are. So I think that goes back to what you said of there is joy, there is something at the end when all that's done that you overcame, and there's beauty in that itself. Speaking of, I know I'm gonna bring up her tattoo, if that's okay, if you'll show so we can zoom in on that. They're Russian waters. So explain that. I think this would be a kind of a good thing to maybe end on.
So like rushing waters, I believe it's been a while ago. I believe it was after my 4th knee surgery. I was very overweight. I was battling a lot of depression. And I know a lot of people use the word depression lightly, but I had actually gotten to a point in my life to where I knew there was one sure way that I wouldn't be in pain anymore. That there was one sure way I could just take care of this and I wouldn't live in pain, I wouldn't walk in pain, and that's a crazy place to be, to even think back on that, because I was just tired of hurting. I was so tired of hurting. I didn't have any hope. I had hope in nothing. And I grew up, I mean, I was pretty much given birth to in church. Like, my family, we've got an awesome church-going family. Like, my mom's the pianist, my granddad's the music minister, my dad's head deacon, and I had kind of just strayed away from the Lord during that time. So I had no hope in anything, because all I could see was all the darkness around me and my current situation. And I just broke down one day, a little later on after my back surgery, because here I was, you know, in the prime of my life. I mean, I felt like I was 27 years old. I had a beautiful baby girl, and I had just had back surgery. I couldn't even pick her up. She was breastfeeding at the time, and my husband would actually have to bring her to me and just lay her on me so I could nurse her. And one day I just broke down, and I cried and I said, God, if you will just give me a sign, give me a word, tell me something, like, I will become different. I will become the complete opposite of what I am right now. Whatever that is, I will become the complete opposite of that. And my husband, not a lot of people know this story because I don't want them to think I'm crazy, but my husband, I remember telling him, I'm like, I feel like God gave me this word, but it's a crappy word. Like, I want a good word. I want like this word that changes people's lives. And he gave me the word stagnant. And I just kept thinking, why that word? That is the weirdest word ever. But I hadn't actually looked deeper into it. And I thought, well, let me look up what stagnant means. So I was reading the actual definition of stagnant, and it was still, lifeless, dead, lethargic, unmoving, unmotivated, like everything that I was right then in my life, everything. And I was like, and I remembered what I told God, that I would become the opposite of whatever I was at that moment in my life. So I was like, okay, what's the opposite of stagnant? And it says moving freely, such as rushing waters. And I was like, that's it. I want to live like rushing waters. Yeah. And that kind of became my mentality to walk forward with, was whatever I was, I want to be the opposite of it. I want to be mobile. I want to be free in my body, free in my mind, releasing judgment. I don't want to live in fear. I don't want to live in restrictions. I don't want to constantly wait for the next injury. I want to be like rushing waters. And we were actually watching River Monsters, and they were talking about this river in the Amazon that is so unstoppable. No matter what they do to it, the flow can never be redirected. If something drops in it, it's just immediately gone. And I thought of that, and I was like, that is so cool. Like, imagine being that unstoppable. And they said the reason why that river is so unstoppable is because of the source that it's fed with. And I was like, okay, I know what my source is. You know, my source is Jesus Christ. And if he is feeding me, if he is directing me, and if he is channeling into me, then my flow is that unstoppable current. And even if, you know, there are barriers that come in the way and you're dammed up for a season, those waters rise above it and they spill over the top. You know, just understanding that even though obstacles are going to come in your way, because when I had my 5th knee surgery, I had already ran a half marathon. I had already lost a ton of weight. Like, I was healthy, and I thought, okay, I'm doing great. And then boom, all of my injuries were through motocross racing. And then my 5th knee surgery was because I slipped off a top step.
Wow.
And just completely destroyed my knee on a rainy day. And I had ran a 5-mile morning and just slipped on some stairs, and realizing that we really aren't in control. But yeah, just having that mentality of even when those obstacles happen, even when that fear starts to creep in, I think sometimes we need to look at fear as excitement.
Yeah.
And realize that it's not really something we should be fearful of, but excited about. And excited about the opportunity to learn and to grow. And, you know, it's just a cool thing to really just work on that mindset change.
And I love that one word, unstoppable, because, you know, you have those fears, but then you get over it. You look at it as a speed bump, as an obstacle, and you look at your life as, I'm unstoppable.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important.
Well, and don't necessarily get that tunnel vision, because I expected at this point in my life that I was going to be a professional motocross racer, because that's all I had for myself was, I'm going to race. This is what I'm going to do. And if you'd have told me at that time that I was going to be competing in triathlons, I would have said, no, I don't pedal, I twist the throttle. And that was my mentality. And, you know, that was completely changed due to necessity in some ways. But, you know, I mean, just changing that mindset.
And it goes back to mindset. You're absolutely right. So if you change your mindset, I think anything is possible. Is there anything you would like to say in closing that we haven't covered on fear?
I don't think so. One of the things that you had on here that I wanted to say real quick, because this is my heart, and I don't even know if it's still on there. But like you had like not the norm.
Yes,
being like
right.
Is it still on there? Okay.
We just get that one.
And I mean, coming from the yoga community, you know, we're the least normal people in the crowd, and you know, we fear being normal and being accepted, and that goes back into judgment, I think. But what are we trying to tailor our life to?
And what is the norm?
Yeah, I mean,
You know,
there's no such thing as normal, but are you trying to tailor your life to a TikTok video or to an Instagram post, when I guarantee that's probably not real life?
Right.
And even social media influencers, like people that you watch on YouTube and stuff, they'll tell you the effort or the work that went into that post.
Right.
Or the work that went into that video, and it's not real life.
Right.
So what you're trying to achieve is not even real life. I mean, it's not even a reality.
And I think that's huge too, because I get a lot of people that come through the doors of the gym that feel comfortable as part of our community, whereas they might not have felt comfortable in a different community. But that goes back to going where you do feel comfortable and becoming part of that community and kind of finding what's best for you.
Yeah, finding your flow.
norm. You know, and not thinking you have to fit in to somebody else's norm.
Yeah.
Find what's best for you.
And just finding your flow in life, because I did CrossFit for like 3 months, and I'm like, why are we throwing stuff? Like that was not necessarily the environment that I was used to, and I loved the workouts, but to me it was like, quit dropping stuff, like what are you doing? It's just this completely different environment. But if I brought some CrossFit people into yoga, they would be like, what are we doing here? So and I think so too, a lot of this, one thing that's been on my heart recently is really understanding what community is. Because I think we fear relationships, we fear getting real with people sometimes, and maybe you've gotten real or gotten close to the wrong people, but really finding that community, you know, just like with the CrossFit community, the yoga community, whatever that is for you, you know, whether that being in fitness or just in daily life, you know, finding a group of moms that you can spend your time with and talk to, you know, or whatever, just finding your community.
And I like to tell people a lot in the fitness world is, you know, you're looking for your community, kind of where you need to be in the fitness world. It's the same as church. We have tons of different churches. Not everybody goes to the same church. they go to the church that they feel is comfortable for them, where they feel like that's where they belong. Same thing with school. If people have a choice, sometimes at school people don't have a choice. They have to go where they live. But if you have a choice, then you can choose to do public versus private or homeschool. So I think it just all goes back to knowing yourself well enough to figure out, you know, what you need and what your norm is, and being comfortable with that and not fearing what others are going to think.
Well, and we try so hard to hide parts of ourselves, you know, out of fear, when we don't even realize that, like, the weirdness is probably what brings us all together. Because if we realize, like, hey, you're a little weird, I'm a little weird, like, and that's what actually can bring us all together.
That's funny. I tell my students the first day of school that everybody's weird in their own little way.
Yeah.
And that's what makes us all unique, and that's what makes the world go round. Because if we were all the same, how boring would it be? It would be very boring. So I think that embracing each other's differences is what makes it so great, and respecting each other's opinions and different perspectives.
Well, and just, I mean, with the fear thing, I mean, realizing that there's always going to be fear, but something I talk about in a lot of our meditations is just releasing the hold that it has on us, and not being, you know, not being controlled and directed by it.
Right.
Because one of my meditations this week that I put up on YouTube was, you know, fear and faith require the same thing. Fear and faith, they take up the same amount of space in our spirits and in our minds, and they both require us to believe.
Right.
And you can either believe in that faith and walk forward in that faith, or you can believe in that fear and walk forward in that fear. Because it's the exact same, it's going to require the same amount of effort to believe in fear and to believe in faith. But which one are you going to walk in?
Right. And I think that is good. Faith over fear. Faith over fear. Well, I think that we have covered a lot on fear. There's a lot more we could have probably said. But for time's sake, we'll leave it at that today. Jessica, thank you for coming on and talking this out, and I hope that we have inspired and motivated some of you to think about fear and to self-reflect, and we hope to see you back on the upcoming shows.